Welcome to Glass in Session, Season 19, Year 6. I'm your host, Val. Thank you for meeting me back here in this crazy wine pod space. In the last episode, we kicked off Season 19 with sparkling wine from Trentino-Alto Adige, focusing on Trento DOC, a classic method fizz with a cool history for which Giulio Ferrari, no, not the car, is most credited. So I had a little peek at my editorial calendar, I did a little shuffling, and I decided we should cover the rest of the Trentino-Alto Adige wine region while we're up here before we tackle the other northern Italian regions. Sound like a plan? Just a recap of where we are. Geography-wise, the region known as Trentino-Alto Adige, or Südtirol, is Italy's northernmost wine region, and it is divided into two provinces, Bolzano, Bozen in the north, snuggling up to the Austrian border, hence the still-speaking German part of Italy, and the southern section known as Trento, which shares the capital's name, also Trento, where they speak Italian. And while we're tackling this region of two aforementioned provinces, let's divide and conquer each one separately, starting with Alto Adige, the one further north. We'll explore the unique aspects of the region, the grapes, the wines, the appellations, and then we'll do the same with Trentino. Beginning with Alto Adige, we already know that we are so far north that the cool climate wine styles will dominate. As I mentioned, this part of Italy's far north sits on the border of Austria's Tyrol. One of the reasons Alto Adige is known as Südtirol or South Tyrol is because this region was part of Austria until 1919. Between 1806 and 1918, this was territory belonging to the Kingdom of Bavaria. It's named for the Adige or Etsch River and sits in the foothills of the Dolomites where we find the vineyards. The combination of altitude, the over 100 types of soils, we have the Alps, the warm Mediterranean air climates, the moderating effects of the aura influence from Lake Garda that flows northward between March and September, the climate, the aspects on the hillsides, the exposure from the sun, the drainage, for example. These are all part of the tapestry that weaves this region's wine personality, as well as the unique approach to winemaking when compared with other Italian wine regions. All of this provided mainly by nature, entwined with a history that places Alto Adige as one of the first vine-growing regions of any of the German-speaking places. By this I mean there is archaeological evidence dating back over 2,500 years to the Rhaetians who grew their grapes here. And now I'm thinking we have never covered the Rhaetians. They are not on the wine history bingo card available in my TeePublic store. So who the heck were the Rhaetians? Well, guess what? I had to look them up too. Because they were, besides the Etruscans and the Veneti, which were people from the Veneto region, they were an ethnic group that inhabited the alpine regions and valleys, along with the Eugani, who were people from nearby Colli Eugani. So the Rhaetians were inspired by the Etruscans, and based on studies of their language and wine, of course, was part of the Etruscan culture. According to AltoAdigeWines.com, the archaeological evidence includes ladles and vine knives, sadly. No drinking horns as found in other ancient wine-adjacent civilizations as we found around Afghanistan, for example. So what is it about this wine region today that makes it so intriguing? Well, let's start with its grapes and wines, and after all, that's why we're here. We're going to get the big honking region out of the way first. You see, the overall DOC appellation of Trentino-Alto Adige does contain the following DOCs, which are in both the Trento and Bolzano provinces. Beginning with Val d'Adige or Etschtaler DOC. This extends from north of Bolzano, down to Lago di Garda, and east down even further south toward Verona along the Val d'Adige River. DOC Val d'Adige was created in 1975 with 9 approved styles underneath it, from Bianco, Rosato, which is rosé, and Rosso, which is red, to styles made with particular grapes that are going to be named in the wine style, like Val d'Adige Chardonnay DOC, Val d'Adige Pinot Bianco DOC, and Val d'Adige Schiava DOC. And check this out, Val d'Adige Chardonnay Frizzante DOC and Val d'Adige Pinot Bianco Frizzante DOC. What? Never heard of either? Now gotta try both, I'm thinking. The Lago di Caldaro or Culturer DOC, it was created in 1970 where Schiava is the star, or the Schiave if we're talking about Schiava Grossa, Schiava Gentile, and Schiava Grigia, which are 3 different grapes. We're in red wine territory either way, with the appellations as follows. Lago di Caldaro DOC, Lago di Caldaro Classico Superiore DOC, Lago di Caldaro or Caldaro Scelto, which is selected, Auslese, Classico Superiore DOC, and Lago di Caldaro or Caldaro Scelto Auslese DOC. So as I mentioned, those two come under the umbrella appellation, if you will, of Trentino-Alto Adige DOC. So two sub-appellations under there. Now, the growing regions under the Alto Adige or Südtirol DOC appellation are all in the Bolzano province. Here's a quick overview of the 6 subzones created in 1975. The first one, the furthest east of the Alto Adige subzones, is Val d'Isarco or Eisigtal. It is the farthest north of Italy's wine production zones and produces mostly dry whites with Silvaner, Veltliner, Kerner, Müller-Thurgau, which we learned about in the Lake Constance episode, linked, and Pinot Grigio, Riesling, Traminer, Aromatico, aka Gewürztraminer. But there was one exception to the white wines rule here, the Klausner Leitacher, made with red grapes Schiava, Vernach, Lagrein, or Portuguese or Portogalo or Blauer Portugieser. Santa Maddalena, or Sankt Magdalener, is a tiny subregion north of Bolzano. Much of the growing area here lies in the Val d'Isarco zone, with some in the much overlapping Colli di Bolzano and Terlano zones. International grapes such as the Bordeaux varieties, as well as the Burgundian varieties, which would be Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, grow here, along with the autochthonous Schiava, which I just mentioned, including Schiava Grossa, Grigia, and Gentile, and the aforementioned Lagrein and Portoghese and Moscato Giallo. The Colli di Bolzano, Botzner, Leiden, overlaps pretty much all of Santa Maddalena and the southwest corner of Val d'Isarco and the middle of Terlano. Merano, or Marinese di Collina, or Marinar Hugel, is located west of Val d'Isarco around the city of Merano. They have a huge wine festival every year. I think it's usually around November in Merano. So much fun. Very, very classy, by the way, except when people grab their crotch at you when they walk by. Yep, had that happen to me up there. Everybody was a little too tipsy, and perhaps maybe everybody had a little too much fun afterwards, but back to the wine. This is where we find only red wines made with the Schiava to wear the appellation label. Otherwise, wines made with other grapes are for local production. Terlano, or Terlaner, west of Val d'Isarco, between Merano and Bolzano, are south of the Marinese di Collina region, also only produces white wines here, with Pinot Bianco, Chardonnay, Pinot Grigio, Silvaner, Riesling, here called Riesling Renano, and Welsh Riesling, here called Riesling Italico. Finally, we have Val Venosta, or Vinschgau. It's the furthest west of the DOC Alto Adige subzones, and pretty much all of the grapes I've already mentioned, a whole bunch of them, including Malvasia Ischia and Sauvignon Blanc, here just called Sauvignon. These would all be labeled as Alto Adige DOC, but the subzone name would appear on the label in large letters. That's Alto Adige. Lots of whites, some reds with native grapes, and moving on to Trentino. A little terminology to get out of the way here first. So, Trentino is the wine region. Trentino DOC is the appellation. Trentino DOC you're going to find as appellation varietal wines like Cabernet, Lagrein, Schiava, as well as styles like Bianco, mostly Chardonnay, and Pinot Bianco, or Rosato, or what they call Kretzer, which are rosés. Now, so Trentino, the overall region, Trentino DOC is the appellation. Trento is the main province, in which there is Trento, the main town. And under the Trentino DOC appellation, we have Trento DOC, or what we call Trento DOC, the classic method sparkling wine. That's all they make in that appellation, and I covered it in the last episode, linked for your listening pleasure if you want to go back and learn about that fizz. But the Trentino DOC itself was created in 1971, and here, the vineyards benefit from not only an alpine climate due to the elevations above 656 to over 2,600 feet, but also the continental and Mediterranean influences from the Dolomites and Lago di Garda, respectively, as I already mentioned. Now, I also did talk about Lago di Garda last season, and I will link that episode up for you along with related episodes that I do bring up in this podcast, so you don't have to go searching for them if you're like, missed that one, or I might go back and listen to that one. There are 5 subzones that I'll hit on quickly under the Trentino DOC geographical indication. And I should note that there is a region marked on the Quattro Calici map that has the entire region pegged out for the production zone of Vinsanto, encompassing the northern bay of Lago di Garda, and of course, DOC Vinsanto del Trentino, made with the white Nosiola grape, would come under the larger Trentino DOC appellation. Now, as we move north away from Lago di Garda, First, we hit Marzemino, within which lies Isera and Ziresi. Both are only for Marzemino Superiore and Castelbeceno. I hope I got that pronunciation right. Castelbeceno produces Moscato Giallo, dried and late harvest style wines, which you'll see as Trento Superiore Castelbeceno DOC, Trento Superiore Castelbeceno Passito DOC. So Passito meaning the dried grapes, did a whole episode on that too, which I can link up for you. And Trentino Superiore Castelbeceno Vendemmia Tardiva DOC. Vendemmia Tardiva only means late harvest. So those are your dried grapes and late harvest styles under that appellation. Now what's going on here is the Trento Superiore DOC appellation with the specific styles are all dictated in the Disciplinare with strict production standards. And as we move further north, we're going to find Sorni, red and white, i.e. Trento Sorni Bianco DOC, made with Müller-Thurgau, Nocciola, Pinot Bianco Silvano, or Trento Sorni Rosso DOC, made with Lagrein, Schiava, Gentile Griglia Grossa, and the grape Taraldugo e Basta. And that's all the two styles, red and white, with the grapes I just mentioned. Valle di Cembra, created in 2002, is home to some really unique styles, all superiore, such as Schiava and Schiava Gentile, Müller-Thurgau, Riesling, and Pinot Noir, all superiore styles. So the wines here would show up on the label as follows: Trentino Superiore Valle di Cembra Pinot Nero DOC, appellation, place name, grape name, DOC. Oh, wine labels, so much fun in this area. So hopefully, next time you go to a wine shop and you start seeing things like this on a label, because they are out there. I've got a really nice Kerner right now that I'll put on Instagram for you. Like the Trento DOC, which I call an umbrella DOC, Superiore DOC underneath it, etc. Remember that Trentino DOC is its own DOC in the Trentino-Alto Adige appellation. And then under that, we have the Trento DOC, which we did hit up in the last episode, for its own DOC for classic method sparkling wine made with grapes grown in Trentino. And then there is the Taraldugo Rotagliano DOC, created in 1971. It is produced with, you guessed it, the Taraldugo grape, which can be traced back to the 15th century in this area. Styles include rosé or rosato or Kretzer, red or rosso, superiore and superiore reserva styles. Now, a little note on some of the terminology I'm using. I've talked about this before, how when we see words on a label, like in America, reserve means absolutely nothing legally. However, in Italy, the word riserva, if you see riserva on a bottle, that usually indicates that there is a period of aging that is longer than the base style of that wine. If you see Classico on a label, that actually is a zone. It's not really a style. It means the grapes come from a particular, often historical zone of production. Then finally, I've said superiore a lot during this episode. Superiore often means the wine is produced in a more stringent way than the base wine of that appellation, and also is going to have a little bit more alcohol. So, Classico is a production zone of historical significance. Reserva means it's undergone a little more aging, and superiore is going to be a little higher in alcohol. So you can actually have Classico, Reserva, Superiore all on one bottle. But I just wanted to put that out there. I say it all the time, but in case this is your first time tuning in, I just wanted you to have that vocabulary. Val d'Adige Terra dei Forti DOC is in the Adige River Valley, where we find a few medieval castles, which they call forts, which is where this appellation got its name, and extends into the Verona province. Wines from this area can be traced back to the 1st century CE, although this DOC was created not even 20 years ago in 2006. There are 6 styles with the grapes named under this DOC. Interesting red grapes include here the spicy Cassetta and the Lambrusco alla foglia frastagliata, aka Enanzio, which has historical significance in this region's history and creates full-bodied styles. Under this appellation, you'll find red styles with names like Val d'Adige, so the overall territory, Terra dei Forti, Cassetta, the grape, DOC, Val d'Adige Terra dei Forti, Cassetta Riserva, DOC, Val d'Adige Terra dei Forti Enanzio, DOC, that's that Lambrusca alla foglia frastagliata, and Val d'Adige Terra dei Forti Enanzio Riserva, DOC. The whites are for Val d'Adige Terra dei Forti Pinot Grigio, DOC, and Val d'Adige Terra dei Forti Pinot Grigio Superiore, DOC. Casteller, DOC, also extends from Adige and the Cembra River valleys over 48 communes, but only contains about 50 hectares of vines in all the appellations. Created in 1974, Casteller, DOC, is also all red wines from the likes of not only the reds I've already mentioned, the Schiave, the Tiroldico, the Lambrusco alla Foglia Fastigliata, as well as a minimum of, guess what, 50% Merlot. Merlot. Bam. I think ending it on Merlot when it comes to those wine appellations is the way to bring this home. So many interesting wines under this appellation, so little time, hashtag, am I right? And some of you who really know your Italian wine may have noticed I left one out. I'm going to get to it, so don't worry, it's happening. For the rest of you, have you noticed I only talked about DOC level wine here? That's because it's mostly what they do. Under the 9 DOCs here, there are 4 IGP appellations. They comprise less than 16% of production. According to Italian Wine Central and Quattro Calici, that Chardonnay accounts for 21 to 22% of the plantings, followed by Pinot Grigio at 19%, then the red Schiava at less than 10%, and Müller-Thurgau at 6%, Merlot at 4%. Of the 15,000 plus hectares of vines, it's interesting to point out that 41% of the plantings are white, so Chardonnay is being half of that really makes sense. But a whole lot of crazy red grapes make up nearly 60% of the plantings, like the Gropello we talked about in the Lago di Garda episode, not to be confused with the Gropello di Revo, which I think we did a cork dork alert or a grape gab about. Marzemino, Lambrusco, Lagrein, Schiava also live here, as do St. Laurent, Rotberger, Renault, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and Zweigelt. Remember, we're close to Austria, and this used to be part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, so all day long with the Germanic varieties. And again, you also see in Alto Adige, you'll see German labels on the bottles as well as the Italian. So a lot of things, including the roadsides in 2 languages. It's one of the reasons I love being up there. It looks like you're up in Austria, but it is a really interesting melange of culture up there. And we see that reflected in the wine as well. It's also interesting to note that 86% of the vines are on sloping mountainsides, with 14% in the hills. Valleys are often reserved for fruit trees, as a lot of apples are grown here. So now we're going to bring it on home for real with this fun white DOC that I haven't even mentioned yet. Trentino-Alto Adige, Trentino really, shares this DOC with both Friuli Venezia Giulia and Veneto. And this DOC is called Delle Venezie DOC, created in 2016, which is all pretty much Pinot Grigio. Within this DOC are appellations such as Bianco delle Venezia DOC, which is dry white wines, all the white grapes, including Chardonnay, Pinot Bianco or Pinot Blanc, Müller-Thurgau Garganega, we know that one from Suave, Verduzzo Friulano, Verduzzo Trevignano, and Tokai Friulano, which we'll get to in the next episode. But there are also Pinot Grigio delle Venezia DOC, minimum 85% Pinot Grigio, which is dry, Pinot Grigio della Venezia Frizzante DOC, 85% Pinot Grigio, also dry, and Pinot Grigio della Venezia Spumante DOC, same thing, 85% Pinot Grigio. There are also DOP products you may have heard of from this area, including cheeses like Asiago and Grana Padano DOP. DOP means Denominazione Origine Protetta, the protected geographical regions where these foods, these products can come from. Otherwise, they're not authentic. So that is Trentino-Alto Adige in a nutshell. I thank you for clicking play, for subscribing, for keeping a spot open for me in your podcast feed, and thank you so much for joining me. You can always reach out to me via email, val@glassinsession.com, unless you're trying to sell me your, improve your YouTube or Instagram services, which I have no interest in whatsoever because I hate social media, but I'm there once in a while. So if you're out there, pick your poison. Blue Sky, Glass in Session, Vino with Val on Threads and Instagram. You'll see Glass in Session, trademark, in my bio. I'm on Spoutable sometimes as Glass in Session, once in a while on Pinterest as Vino with Val, and on Facebook/Glass in Session. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Valerie Caruso, DWS, CWE, FWS, letters, wine stuff, and audiobook narrator, which reminds me, you can find this podcast and the latest audiobooks I've narrated on Audible. I usually talk about smartass cat content as my podcast Smokerdoodles is at Nibelung_smoke_show on Instagram. Smokey's been having some health issues lately, so I'll just ask you to please pour one out for my sweet soul of a fluffy assistant. He's still here. He's still spunky. We're giving him meds, and he's got those older cat things going on. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it for you, but please pour one out for Smokey. And I will also mention there is glass in session. And yes, of course, podcast swag, which will always be there in my TeePublic store, linked way at the bottom of my show notes and on my website and on Smokey's Instagram page. And this week, since I'm not hawking baby food shakes, apparently it's a thing, socks, or skincare, scoring yourself some of this swag is a small way to support the Winecast. And I assure you, I donate to animal welfare organizations throughout the year, and that's pretty much where my profits go. So if you do support the podcast that way, it kind of helps pay for my time and it helps me support the animal welfare organizations that I support. Glass in Session is a production and registered trademark of Vino With Val, LLC. Music, Write Your Story by Joy Stock. Website is glassinsession.com/podcast.